This is HumanLife 3, a game where players are dropped into a massive world and forced to build civilizations from nothing. And today, over 100 players are about to do exactly that. If they want to survive, they will need to gather resources, make food, and eventually form societies with other players. Over the next several hours, civilizations will rise and fall. New technologies will change the balance of power, and we will see kingdoms become empires. This is the story of how one empire rose above the rest, and it all came crashing down. In this video, where 100 players create civilizations in Roblox. Like every server in HumanLife 3, this one started with complete chaos. Players spawned in all over the world and immediately had the same problem. Finding enough food to stay alive was very hard. This is why many people immediately started gathering materials to build small farms all over the world. This is usually where the first civilizations were born, around these small farming communities. One example was the Byzantine kingdom, which was a pretty large farming community that had actually managed to gather around 5 people, which was impressive for the time. Straight north of the Byzantine kingdom was a Russian kingdom that I did not know how to pronounce, but they were doing basically the same thing as everyone else, farming and gathering material. In Africa, nomadic tribes had gone together to form the Batukar kingdom, and in India, the same thing was happening to the Horus dynasty. But far away, over in Egypt, a new nation was forming along the Nile. The Kingdom of Turkey was the first nation to discover bronze, and also the first nation to get a proper king, by the name of Libo, guarded by his loyal soldiers, one of them being a literal kid. Despite Libo's horrible geography skills, he had managed to push his country to the Bronze Age, and he was the first to do so. With his nice farms along the Nile, it was clear that Turkey was here to stay. But they were not alone in the discovery of bronze, because far out east, the Kingdom of China had discovered bronze as well. And what made China different from Turkey was that its population was rising way faster, mostly thanks to its large influx of migrants, as well as their large farms along the rivers. Meanwhile, far away in Africa, the Batukar kingdom was rising. Although they were not as strong as China and Egypt, they were still growing very rapidly, with many African tribes choosing to live there rather than being completely on their own. In the Batukar kingdom, we saw a strong focus on copper in the economy, and it was actually one of the main currencies used. Now in the world, we saw many different tribes scattered all across the map. In Asia, we had China, the Horus dynasty, as well as the Golden Horde dominating the continent. Far out west, we had Turkey, for some reason located in Egypt. Meanwhile, Europe was full of different warlords controlling different parts of the map. Far down south, the Batukar kingdom was growing, and to the west, many Native American tribes were growing, but one would eventually rise above them all. At this point, we truly started seeing proper civilizations rising all over the world, but it is proper to note that most people at this time mostly lived as nomads, living on their own or in their own small communities. Over in America, we saw a new kingdom rising, known as the Greystone Empire. Before this, it was simply just a tribe wandering around America, but now it has settled down after a large war with the local Basque population that they managed to push out under the reign of King Menino. But while the kingdoms of the east were quickly rising through the ages, the Greystone Empire didn't even know how to farm. Surely, this small little American tribe could not rise far, right? Right? Well, only time could really tell. Far beyond the Himalayan mountains, the nation of China was growing day by day into a much larger kingdom. Despite not having a proper king, the nation's ruler was very clear. It was a smith named Mick. He was very clear with how he argued. He said that no king can rule China, as only the heavens had the right to the throne. In the schools of China, a famous rage baiter, philosopher, was educating his students. No way we found Socrates. And what are you? A strong man. Bro, you're a kid, bro. The final strong man. The kid left. He made the kid leave. But Socrates was not the only one making enemies in China. A man named Psyche had been accused of killing someone, and Mick personally attacked him. But Mick soon let him go as he ran away. Why Mick did this, I'm not sure, but maybe he could not prove that he was the killer. Either way, Mick was definitely the one keeping the peace in China. And he mostly did this by arming his own soldiers to keep the peace and protect him from any nobles. Now, it was very clear that China was a rising power in the world. But while China was lucky, some nations were not. For example, the Horus dynasty was actively declining. Its people were poor, and many people wanted to move out of India and instead migrate all the way to China. Meanwhile, in Europe, very few things had changed. Most people still relied heavily on farming instead of actually developing technology like all the other continents. One possible reason for Europe staying pretty backwards is that the people were very divided between different nations and tribes across the continent. This often caused tribal wars between the different people. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the nation was actually declining rapidly, mostly because of a large famine that killed many people, including the king. The streets of Egypt were now extremely empty, with only a few people wandering around, trying to keep the nation alive. So for now, Egypt was still standing. Meanwhile, far away in America, many tribes had decided to settle down and build their own cities instead of just wandering around like nomads. For example, the Greystone Empire had managed to build a small settlement with small farms along the river and many people working to establish the colony. The rumors of China's prosperity had spread all over the world, bringing in people from as far as Europe. And the rumors were definitely true. China had actually found out how to make iron, and had actually surpassed Turkey technologically. It was clear that mixed politics was working very well. And meanwhile, Socrates' teachings were definitely helping, as the schools in China advanced rapidly, ensuring every kid got a stable future. Even though China was not in a golden age yet, it was clearly going in the right path. While many other nations were falling to war, plague, and famine, China was clearly only rising. At this point in history, we had seen many nations risen and fall. One nation that was clearly rising was China, under the leadership of Mick. They were already overshadowing both of their competitors. Meanwhile, in America, the Greystone tribe had managed to push out the Basque tribe out of their own territory and declared King Menino as king of the region. Now, the Greystone Empire had established itself as a proper empire, ruling vast lands across North America. But to be able to maintain their land, they had to brutally suppress the local population and even drive them out of their own land. While all of this was happening, a Turkish explorer arrived in America after his boat had capsized. Even though he experienced this brutality firsthand, he still wanted to help the Greystone Empire. As we can see, the nation had developed quite a lot, with advanced farmland along the river, providing a lot of food for the local population. Meanwhile, the explorer Ethan was considering staying. Meanwhile, in the Golden Horde, things were not going as well. As it turned out, Regent Mick had ordered the nation to be completely subjugated and destroyed. To do this, he had decided to send out his former enemy, Psyche, to take them down. But it quickly turned out that just one man was not going to be able to pull this off, as he had already made big walls surrounding the entire city. Psyche immediately tried to break down the first wall. The Mongol leader was quick and decided to repair it meanwhile, making it impossible to break. These walls were clearly a problem for Psyche, especially considering he was not expecting them to have these advanced networks. After many attempts to break down the walls, he would never succeeded, and was eventually forced to leave unsuccessful, going back to Mick and telling of their defenses. Meanwhile, over in Canada, the Greystone Empire was still rising, but disaster had struck, as a Turkish migrant had been accused of killing someone. In a crazy moment, he was locked into the blacksmith and brutally stabbed to death by the smith. The incident in the Greystone Smithery that day made it very clear that an alliance between Greystone and Turkey was impossible. A nation far to the east was only rising. Far from any kind of conflict, China had become an empire. With a very large and motivated population, as well as large schools and workshops, it was becoming very clear that we were entering the Chinese Golden Age. With a massive army and trade power, the nation's influence was expanding all over the world, while the city itself was growing more and more every day, with migrants arriving from all over the world. The Chinese economy was booming, with full markets covering the city, as well as very nice streets with good city planning. Although the ghost Socrates has very sadly died, his son had soon taken over teaching the kids of China. And meanwhile, religion had become extremely important in Chinese society. And the markets of China had filled with foreign traders trying to take advantage of the prosperity, while Chinese traders were traveling as far as Scandinavia to be able to trade and form diplomatic relations with many different countries around the world. But as Chinese influence grew around the world, not every nation was profiting from it. In fact, many nations saw a decline in population as people chose to flee to China instead of staying in their own home. One nation that was now experiencing this curse was the Kingdom of Batkar. But even though China was growing extremely strong, they were not the only ones, as many other kingdoms in the world were still on their feet, even benefiting from trade with China. At this point in history, many nations had grown, but the one that had grown the biggest was obviously China. With a strong population of 30 people, China managed to capture the Golden Horde, whose people fled to Juliana in Europe. Over in America, the Greystone Empire had reached a population of 20 people, who were only growing. But back in China, everything was about to change, as the Grand Regent Mick was getting challenged by a new emperor named Radu, who sent his men to try to execute Mick. As the assassin arrived and tried to kill him, Mick was ready to defend. But he quickly deflected all of his blows and defended very well. Soon, people started dying in the market as they were caught up in the brutal battle. After a while, Mick and his guards managed to take the situation into control. They killed every last one of the monarchists trying to take the throne. Mick had survived the assassination attempt, and the coup had definitely failed. Mick's regime would rule another day, while Radu had to go into exile, fleeing China and going all the way over to Egypt, where he hoped he could get asylum from the Turkish Sultan. As Radu arrived in Egypt, he was soon welcomed by the king with open arms, who wanted to know everything about China and what they should do to prepare in case of a war. Radu was very happy to share information, as he hoped that the Turkish army in the future could help him with retaking the Chinese throne. Meanwhile, back in China, a purge was happening. Mick's guard were constantly killing suspected supporters of Radu in all places. Meanwhile, Mick and the royal priest were walking around, patrolling every house, ensuring that no one was a royalist. The Radu coup had left a huge scar in China, and it was showing in every street. But while China had fallen into this age of uncertainty, one nation was rising above every other country. The Greystone Empire had already reached the Renaissance, and had also developed the ability to produce steel. Although the population of the Greystone Empire was smaller than China's, it made up for it in technology and political stability. Meanwhile, back in China, the word of the invasion of steel had spread, and many people were becoming very scared of the Greystone Empire. Meanwhile, the purge was very active, and the guards, following the orders of Mick, went around killing suspected loyalists of Radu. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Radu was living very safely under protection of the Turkish government. Even though the Sultan of Turkey knew the risks of keeping Radu, he also understood the many opportunities that came with it. Soon, information spread to China that Radu was being kept by the Turkish government, and the people were not happy. Some were even demanding a total war on Turkey. The tensions between China and Turkey were sky high. But while all of this was happening, the Greystone Empire was only rising. The city that was just once a few tents had now become a massive hub of technology. With their huge school, they could teach many students at once, and their large farms provided food for a growing population. it was clear that King Menino knew how to rule. Back in China, times were very uncertain. Very important people were thrown into jail simply for speaking out against Mick. Even Socrates' own school had burned down and was replaced by a statue in his honor. It was very clear that China was facing many problems, and finally, Mick snapped. In the morning, a ship departed from the coast of China. On board was the warlord Psyche. He had been sent by Mick to capture Radu and bring him back to China to face execution. While Psyche was heading for Egypt, Mick and his companion, CRT, were heading to capture Juliania. Their plan was to quickly capture Juliania, then move south to join Psyche in the war against Egypt. As Mick arrived in Juliania, they soon realized that they had walls. They were hoping to quickly rush through Juliania and capture the city quickly, but now that would be a hard task. But as it turned out, their axes easily tore through the wall, and soon enough, they were inside the city. If you thought they were about to show mercy, then you are dead wrong, because they immediately started massacring the whole city. Even the horses were killed, as the flag was starting to get captured. And the survivors of the raid quickly ran away among the hills, while their village was burning down. When the city population was completely dead, Mick set fire to all the houses, leaving it burning all the way into the morning. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, Psyche had finally arrived and decided to attack early. As he entered the market, he was soon attacked by the Egyptian defenders, who quickly punched him to the ground. This forced him to retreat, and the defenders chased after him. Among the defenders was Radu himself, dressed in a scholar hat, who was the very man he was supposed to bring back home. But now he was being beaten by the emperor. But something he soon realized was that these people didn't have weapons, they only had armor. So he soon managed to start slashing them with his sword, eventually killing Radu. Filled with joy, Psyche immediately started attacking everyone else again, but he was soon pushed back by the Turkish swords. As Psyche retreated, Mick finally arrived on horseback with his companion. They soon started making their way into the market, not knowing that the battle had already started. As they walked into the empty streets of Turkey, they realized that the defenders were nowhere to be seen. But soon the defenders realized that their market was under attack and retreated right back to the market, where they briefly met the Chinese soldiers. But as punishment for keeping Rad from them, they decided that they would have to kill the Egyptians. Soon, the brutal fighting started in the middle of the market. It soon became clear who was the better fighter, as one of the soldiers died and the other escaped through the Nile River. China had managed to win the war and kill Radu. At this point, China had become the world's largest empire, stretching from Siberia all the way to Egypt. But meanwhile, to the west, the Grey Stone Empire was only becoming stronger and stronger, and they had finally reached the industrial era. Steel was no longer an extremely rare and luxury item, because anyone could now buy it at the shops, while the smith was producing high-tier steel weapons and tools for the people. The people of Greystone were prospering under King Menino, with cheap food and good tools, as well as many available jobs for anyone that needed it. At this point, it was very clear that the Grey Stone Empire was becoming the world's most advanced nation. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Mick and his army was burning down the most important buildings to ensure that they couldn't counterattack in the future. At this point, you might think that Mick and his army was gonna go back home and celebrate their victory, but you would be dead wrong, because Mick had other plans. He had heard of the Grey Stone Empire's advanced technologically, and he was afraid of them. So he decided to make a boat and sail directly for the Grey Stone Empire. The plan was to make a swift attack, targeting their king and important buildings and leaving immediately after, before they even knew what happened. When they arrived at the coast of America, they soon found a gap in the wall and snuck right into the city. While Mick moved south to find the king of Greystone, Psyche and CRT moved north to try to find the blacksmith and destroy it. But as it turned out, their ability of stealth was not as good as they thought, and they were soon detected by some Greystone soldiers. The Chinese were immediately confronted and attacked. and a brutal fight broke out right outside of the Notre Dame. Although the Greystone soldiers had better weapons, they soon realized that the Chinese were not bad fighters. In fact, they were extremely good, with CRT pushing back one of the soldiers. But unknown to him, he was pursued by someone behind him. He was soon attacked from behind and started running. Finally, he regrouped with Psyche, but it did not take long for them to be separated once again. With Psyche now running completely from the battle, he was now left alone to fight these two soldiers. And CRT turned out to be a pretty good fighter. But in the end, there was 2 against 1, steel against iron. He was soon pushed back, and eventually he was hunted down and sadly killed. The surprise attack had failed miserably, but something was happening in the market. Mick had found the king, and with one swift blow, he killed Menino and ran away on his horse. The war horn rang out, declaring the king was dead, but Mick had already escaped. The city of Greystone was in panic. Soldiers patrolled all the streets, and people were still unsure what had happened. Meanwhile, Mick was safe outside of the city walls. Although his soldiers had died, Mick had just managed to pull up a huge heist, killing the king of Greystone in 2 seconds, and causing a huge panic in the whole city. Now, the people at least thought that Mick was far away from their capital and not able to harm them anymore. But what they did not know was that Mick was way closer than they thought. Sticking around in the city, he was deciding on his next move, and they decided to make another attack on the market. He quickly rode in and started slashing anyone he saw, and managed to escape as quickly as he arrived. But this time, the Greystone Empire did not want to let him go. They wanted him dead. Soon, another person on a horse pursued him and chased him throughout the city, but he was unable to catch up. As Mick took one last ride throughout the city, he quickly moved out, and soon enough, he managed to escape the pursuer. After the surprise attack, Mick managed to escape the war and eventually fled south, and Greystone was now left in a state of panic. The king who founded the kingdom was now dead, and now his son, Vadim, would take the throne. And he took the throne with vengeance in mind. He wanted all of China to be completely destroyed in a huge world war. Vadim's plan was to create a brand new invention and use it on the Chinese, called the airship. The Greystone people soon went to work gathering material for the brand new airship, and it would not take long for the new ship to be made. One early morning, the airship was finally done. As people became ready to board the Menino bird, the captain had a problem. He did not know how to steer an airship, so as soon as he took control, a pretty big incident happened.
Oh shit. Oh, he just crashed it, bro. Yeah, he just crashed it.
But this did not stop the Greystone Empire. Soon, the airship was up in the air again, and ready for war. Now, all they needed was wait for the last soldier and depart towards China. And finally, when that soldier arrived, they were ready to depart. The Menino bird traveled across the entire world, first into the Mediterranean. After that, it traveled through the deserts of Middle East. After that, it reached India and eventually arrived in China. As soon as they arrived, they started looking for a good place to land the airship. But as it turned out, the city was extremely crowded. There was no good places for the airship to land. Eventually, it crashed right into a residential area and people flew everywhere. Immediately, the Greystone soldiers that survived started killing everyone, committing a huge massacre. The spread out Chinese defenders were unprepared and was quickly killed by the brutal mob of soldiers. The organization of the Greystone Empire proved to be extremely efficient. Their tactic was to always keep together in a huge blob and kill all the Chinese soldiers before they would be able to regroup. But even though the Chinese were unprepared, they still fought extremely well, showing that their military training was definitely paying off. But the Greystone Empire still had way better technology, and their steel weapons soon tore through the Chinese armors and killed the soldiers. Eventually, the last Chinese defender was found, and he was brutally attacked. But he managed to defend himself very well. As he was chased throughout the city, More Greystone soldiers eventually joined in and tried to chase down the last Chinese defender. Vadim thought that the soldiers was Mick himself and wanted to kill him by his own hands. But eventually he realized it was just another soldier. Still, the chase for the last armed soldier of China became extremely brutal. But soon, a miracle happened.
What the hell? Did he just fly up? Where did he go? He's on the roof!
The soldier had somehow gotten up on the roof, and the Greystone soldiers wanted him down quickly. He immediately started breaking down the house in hopes that it would fall down. Mr. Soviet knew he had to do something now, or he would surely be killed by the Greystone army as soon as the house collapsed. And in a split-second decision, he decided to jump onto another roof.
That was a... Oh, he jumped on the roof! He jumped on the roof!
But what he did not know was that one Greystone soldier named Merc had already predicted this, and soon he was stabbed in the back and killed in an instant. After a brutal battle, China had now fallen. China under Greystone occupation was brutal. Many houses were torn down, and many citizens were killed. The main reason the Greystone stayed for so long in China was because they were looking for one person, Mick. But what they did not know was that he would arrive the next morning. As the Greystones prepared to celebrate at Mick's own castle, what they did not know was that he was right behind them on a hill. While Mick was watching over the town he once ruled, one of the Greystone soldiers noticed him and alerted the others immediately. And Mick realized he had done a huge mistake. Soon, all the Greystone soldiers were running to the other side of the castle to see if it was really Mick. And as it turned out, it was. Immediately, the Greystone army started breaking down the weakest part of the wall and chasing after him as fast as they could. What came next has to be one of the coolest manhunts I have ever seen. As Vadim and his whole army chased down the killer of his own father. This time, Vadim would not let him get away. While Mick was running on foot, the Greystone army managed to get their hands on some horses. Mick now realized he could not run anymore. He had to fight. As the first horseman arrived, Mick jumped onto the horse and attacked the rider personally, but he soon fell off and started fighting every horse at once. At this point, any regular soldier would be dead, but Mick still fought. As the reinforcement arrived, Mick still managed to get down 2 horses, and eventually he was so low that he had to retreat. Somehow, Mick had survived this, but now he was on his last legs, and he knew it. And then came the last blow. Mick had been killed. The warlord that once ruled all of China and Asia was now dead on the ground, and the people of Greystone were celebrating. As their airship arrived, they were ready to get back home. They had finally destroyed China and killed Mick. Their job was done. Vadim had achieved vengeance, and now Greystone was destined to rule for another 100 years.